Forward TV. The world is thinking.
The last slide was genetic evolution. That is no question, for instance, that the expansion of our brains was tied, for whatever reason, into our ability of some of us to out-reproduce others. There was natural selection was functioning there. Our genome was changing very rapidly. But fairly early on, about 2.5 million years ago, about the time of Homo habilis, we began to leave the first signs of our culture. Now, culture, which is non-genetic information, which is passed on from generation to generation, is not unique to human beings. But in quantity, it's unique. In other words, we have a scale of culture unknown in any other organism. Chimps have culture, some birds have culture. That is, again, non-genetic information that's passed on from generation to generation. But one of the things although we have a very nice picture of how evolution occurred genetically, we still don't, there's not yet been a Darwin for cultural evolution. We know a lot about it, but we don't really understand the mechanisms. We don't really know how to change it. For instance, if you have a problem with an antibiotic, for instance, and you're getting resistance to it, it's evolving, a geneticist can tell you what to do about it. But if you have a problem like a small-brained president, and you want to know how to do something about it, there's no cultural evolution who can say, the thing you have to do is X, Y, and Z to change it. And I'll come back to that because I think the biggest problem humanity is facing today is fundamentally a behavioral problem where we don't know how actually to go about changing it. It's a problem in cultural evolution, and if there's any time in the last hour and a half, I'll hit on that. The thing to notice here, though, is that culture evolved at a very slow rate at first and then accelerated. Notice this is not a linear scale. You know, it's 2.5 million years ago and 50,000 years ago. So the Oldowan toolkit was around for a vicinity of 800,000 years, followed by the Acheulean, which was over 1 million years. And they went the very slow cultural change. Now, there may have been other cultural changes in records that haven't been left, but nonetheless, this is a fairly good picture of an accelerating rate of change, and it really picked up about 50,000 years ago. Another big controversy about the big leap forward. Jared Diamond may have talked to some of you about this at one time or another. But nonetheless, if you think that just 50,000 years ago we were still concentrating on stone tools and bone needles, and then imagine if you were an anthropologist coming to the remains of Earth, say 10,000 years from now, and you had only the historical record that you got by excavating, and you excavated a site from, say, 1300 AD and a site from today, what would you assume? You would have assumed that organisms of an entirely different genus had made these things. In other words, the difference between the culture, the artifacts, the non-genetic information which was possessed by people in 1300 is just incredibly different from today, whereas here you could take sites 1 million years apart and imagine it's exactly the same organism. So cultural evolution has been accelerating at an incredible rate, and unfortunately we don't understand about it as much as we'd like to.